Today's show is brought to you by HomebrewSupply.com. Homebrew Supply has your favorite recipes, clone kits, ingredients, and draft equipment in stock and shipping out same day on orders placed before 11 a.m. Central. Everyday low pricing plus everyday flat rate $8.99 shipping means Homebrew Supply is your source for your home brewing needs. Go to HomebrewSupply.com, use the promo code HHH, and you'll receive 5% off your order. Some exclusions may apply. See store website for details.
Entertaining shows with content that spreads information and sparks discourse throughout the community. This is the Pearl Media Network.
Now here we are. Welcome to the Homebrew Happy Hour. This is the show where we supply the answers to your homebrewing questions and discuss all things related to craft beer. If you have a question that you'd like discussed on a future episode, visit homebrewhappyhour.com and click on the submit a question link at the top of the page. Or now you can call or text them in by using 325-305-6107. I am your host, Joshua Stooming. Today I'm joined by a fellow home brewer. This is one of those episodes, a special one we do. We've had a couple so far where we feature you guys, the lovely community of home brewers and loyal supporters. I want to say loyal supporters of the show. Kenny, I don't even know if I asked you if you listen to the show.
I do.
Joining me today is Kenny Highman. He's also known as the Brewer of Seville. He has his own homebrewing blog at thebrewerofseville.com. Kenny Highman, thank you so much for coming on the show, my friend.
It's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Oh, privilege. You are you're way too nice. I have to throw myself very quickly on the show under the bus. We're doing small talk before we start recording, and I tell you like, oh, we don't record this live. In case anything happens, we could always stop and we could just like give ourselves some time and then we could come back to it, but it never happens. I flubbed the intro worse than I've ever done in the 2.5. We only have 120. This is the 121st episode, but we've been doing it for over 2 years. I don't like to talk about that little 6-month or 5-month absence that was on my shoulders, but I've never flubbed it that bad. So thank you for joining me for that historic moment in our podcast, Kenny.
That was awesome. I'm glad I could be part of it.
Yeah, I was calling the sponsor, wonderful start. I do appreciate you. You are also very flexible. I know. So when this is published, you're going to be in Florida, I believe, on vacation or for work or both. I forget what you said.
My wife is going to be there on work. I'm going to be there on vacation. So, we're leaving Thursday afternoon, and we won't be back till the following Thursday.
That is wonderful. Orlando? I forget where you told me.
Yeah, we're going to actually be at a Disney resort while she's at a conference. I'll just be hanging out by the pool.
Oh man. I want to start my own separate podcast away from Todd, just about Disney stuff, but he won't underwrite that one, so I haven't done it. I haven't found anyone to sponsor that one.
Well, you can come out and hang out with me. It's 26 degrees here in Ohio right now. So
is it really? Oh,
yes.
Oh, we would. When we're talking about your brew days and stuff, we'll definitely get into that because I know temperature is the great. It is the greatest factor for a lot of people, not only if they brew, but what they brew and how they brew. And I'm certain it affects you. But before we get into that, let's start first by having you explain a little bit about, well, first, like obviously Kenny is your name, but you coined this Brewer of Seville. How did you start with Brewer of Seville? And even more importantly, how did you start into home brewing?
Well, so, I got into craft beer probably in the late 90s. With Sam Adams, Boston Lager was the gateway beer for me. And when we moved into it, we bought our house in 2014. And I always kind of was like, I'd love to try to brew my own beer. I have no idea what goes into it. I have a friend that actually worked at a liquor store in a town close to me, and he taught home brewing classes. And the one time I asked him, I said, Craig, would you mind teaching me, showing me what to do? And he said, sure, get a kit and we'll do it. So I bought a kit on Amazon, and it was a 5-gallon bucket. It was a carboy. It came with a really crummy kettle, just paper thin. I got a kit. It was a wood aged IPA, and it came, and my buddy Craig came over, and he's looking at the ingredients, and he said, I don't, where's the rest of the ingredients? I said, what do you mean? And he said, this is a what I like to call a junior detective kit. This is only a 1 gallon batch. And I said, what? 1 gallon? I said, what am I going to get out of that? Like a case? He's like,
yeah, night.
10 bottles. So we brewed it on my kitchen stove. My wife said it smelled like pea soup in the house. And, it was on from there. And at that point, then I started adding to my equipment afterwards. But the beer actually, I mean, all things considered, turned out pretty decent it was a craft brew kit, I believe.
Okay, well, that's all you can ask for. That's all you can ask right? For. Is decent.
It was drinkable. It was drinkable.
Oh, that's hilarious. For me, I lucked out that the first beer I ever brewed was with people who already knew what they were doing. So that helps out a lot. You were just going in like cold turkey, you're saying, right?
Well, I did have, my buddy was here, and he'd brewed before, and he actually had a beer in NHC a couple of years ago when it was in Maryland.
Oh, nice.
He made it to the final round for a fruit beer. So he was here with me as my guide for the first brew. After that, then I went on my own.
And when did you? I'm assuming just because all that technical glitch and stuff happened that I already forgot. If you mentioned, you said it was a craft brew. I'm assuming it was an extract kit. Then
it was an extract kit. Yes.
How many recipes? How many brew days in before you plunged into all grain?
So it was a year. I started in January of 2017. That was when I brewed my first extract batch. And then it was about a month later, I bought a Edel metal burner. I bought an Anvil 5-gallon kettle. I bought a catalyst from Craft Brew. And so that was probably two months into that. Brewed about probably 15 extract batches before January of 2018. I bought the Robo Brew and went all grain.
Dang, man. That's a lot of batches to be brewing in your first year. Is it because you got hooked or because you were drinking it too?
So here's the thing though. Like I work an hour away from my house. So I have a 2-hour round trip commute every day. Ooh. And then I'm also in college I'm going for my master's. And I'm just wrapping that up. I'll graduate from that in May. But through this whole time, I've been in school. I've worked a full-time job, and I've brewed, and I've maintained a family. So,
oh my gosh, yeah. I don't want my wife listening to this episode knowing it's possible. I try to get away with. I'm at jiu-jitsu all the time, which is just wrestling, sweaty wrestling with your sweaty bros, and my wife gives me enough crap about that. But that's great. That is. Home brewing is, in my experience with myself and my friends who have gotten into it, it is an extremely addictive, rewarding hobby when the beer is at least drinkable. And I think too, I don't know if you're like me, I'm kind of biased when the beers my dad and I brew, even though they've been extract up until this coming weekend's our first all grain brew day. Fingers crossed, knocking on wood, praying. Every beer we've had has turned out, we haven't had any complications. We haven't had oxidation issues. We, all of our temperature, even though we're in Central Texas. And when we did like the alt beer, I thought, oh, for sure we're going to screw this one up because it is so, temperature dependent. You have to be, you have to hit your numbers precise. And we didn't, because we're just like, we don't have any fancy way. And by fancy, I mean just controlled temperature way that isn't air conditioning to ferment in. And so when that turned out good, I think I have a false sense of security now. Like, oh, we're gods. We could do this with our eyes closed. We're professional brewers basically. But I'm wondering if all grain will be when we meet our first kind of snafu. But I do want to talk now, fast forwarding to January of 2018. You picked up a Robo Brew.
Yes.
What made you go to the Robo Brew, and what was your idea in using an automated, an electric all-in-one system like a Robo Brew?
Well, so kind of like Texas, I mean, we have extreme temperatures. Like you guys are hot a lot, but we are very cold at times. I mentioned it's 26 degrees today. So a couple of weeks ago, it was 17 below. So And I can tell you on that day that it was 17 below, I was in my basement brewing. So that's one of the reasons I went to the electric, was because I wanted to brew. I didn't want weather to dictate my brew days.
Right.
So I looked at the Robo Brew, I looked at the Grainfather, I looked at the Mash and Boil, by Brewer's Edge, and the Grainfather was too expensive. You know, it was a grand plus. The Mash and Boil didn't have the wort chiller.
Right.
Well, it didn't have the wort chiller, and the Robo Brew kind of had it all that I needed. So I went with the one without the pump. So it was like $349 to start. So I didn't even have the pump in it. I actually bought an external pump to pump to the fermenter and stuff like that. So, but what happened with the Robo Brew, I don't know if you've heard of some of the issues they've had in the past. They do have a very finicky control board.
Yep.
And mine burn up after about 10 brews.
Oh,
right in the middle of a brew, actually. I was brewing a pumpkin ale, and I went outside to let my dog out, and I had a buddy brewing with me, and he came upstairs and said, Kenny, we got some problems. There's smoke coming from your brew kettle. So
wow.
So I went. It just so happened we were about 10 minutes left in the brew, in the boil. So I fired up my propane burner in the basement, and I finished the brew in the basement.
You know, safety first, man. That's what I always say.
No, I know. Yeah. Hey, man, I grill on my deck, which is attached to my house. So if it blows up, it's going to blow that end of the house off.
I like your line of thinking, Kenny. I don't know if you've watched, we did a brew day on one of these cooler systems, which is actually the one my pop and I are going to use. And Todd was so adamant. He calls it a barn. It's a freaking compound. It's wonderful. But he had, he was brewing. We were filming on the inside part, and on the garage part, he had all the garage doors open, and he made a point in the video to be like, well, now we always only very safe with propane, and we use it only outside and this and that. And I'm kind of rolling my eyes like, dude, I've seen you do some really dangerous stuff. Like, I know that's like covering your butt, I think, for the video's sake, but come on.
Yeah, Todd wouldn't like to brew with me.
Oh, he would. We just wouldn't film it.
We wouldn't document that.
Yeah,
but we did get it done, and actually the beer turned out relatively well. I lost about a gallon because the Robo brews 9 gallons, and I only had a 5-gallon kettle. So by the time I was able to transfer and move stuff around, I ended up with about 4 gallons of pumpkin ale, and we called it Accidentally Awesome Pumpkin Ale. So
that's hilarious
because it turned out pretty good, and it was purely by accident.
That's awesome. Stories on brew days gone bad don't usually have happy endings. So at least you had that going for you, because nothing I have yet, again, knocking on wood and all that good stuff, I've not ever dumped a beer. Have you ever had to dump a beer in your tenure as a home brewer?
I have not. I've almost had to. I did so before my Robo Brew burn up, the first one that I had, I did an Imperial s'mores milk stout, and it was the largest grain bill I'd ever done. And when I went to lift the malt pipe out of the kettle, the bottom fell out. The false bottom collapsed with all the weight.
Oh no!
All of the grain went back into the kettle. So I had to fish it all out with a pitcher, and then pour it through a filter, and then put it back into the kettle. That brew day took me like 8.5 hours.
Oh my gosh. Those aren't the kind of stories I like to hear, but
it turned out okay, because so I did end up getting the beer into the fermenter, and then I also aged it on I had put oak chips in whiskey for about 11 months, and then I took those chips and I moved them to a 5-gallon bucket, and I put the beer, once it was fermented, on those chips for about 2.5 months. So I have like a bourbon aged milk stout.
Dang. So what? the more I'm hearing about like your brew day history and all that, it seems like you don't have a pinned down style that you're married to. Is that fair to say? Like you started with an IPA, which IPAs, when you started in 2017, that was kind of like the beginning of the beginning. They've been around a bit in regards to like the craft scene being IPA heavy. So that's not super surprising that would be a kit you'd find. But all these other, S'more, the Melt Stout, and all these other, Imperial, those are not what I would call like the common, straightforward beers that maybe newer brewers do. What was your line of thought with going into left field earlier than others? Like, did you not have any? Were those the styles you enjoyed drinking, so that's why you brewed them, or you just wanted to learn the brew process on a variety of styles?
Well, so I'm a big fan. My buddy calls me Captain Adjunct because I do brew with a lot of like fruits, and I do like fruitier beers. I like I'm a huge fan of New England, so I know that James is not going to love this episode either. I'm actually drinking one of my New Englands right now, which it's a New England milkshake that I brewed with peaches. So I'm not much for like the Reinheitsgebot all the time. So I will brew. I just brewed I'm entering a Scottish export into the National Homebrew competition, and I'm also going to enter a dragon fruit blonde ale.
Interesting.
It's so that one I've brewed about 4 or 5 times, and everybody says it's like if I had a flagship beer, that's the one they say would be my flagship.
That I was trying to think because I don't have like the BJCP guidelines in front of me. The blonde, I mean, are there subcategories per each primary category that would fall in, or is that going to compete?
It's actually going to go under fruit beer.
Okay, that's what that's what I assumed. I didn't know. I've never brewed a fruit beer. I don't know. You do listen to the show, so that shouldn't surprise you much. And also though, I've been fully transparent on other episodes. Those aren't my favorite styles, but I appreciate the people who brew them and brew them well. When we were in Portland, which I forgot to ask you, you didn't go to NHC last year.
I have not been to any yet. This one I'm going to go to the one in Rhode Island.
I knew you were going to Rhode Island, which, that's going to be amazing. When we were in Portland, we were at Great Notion. I think I've said it and butchered that enough to where I think I got it right now. We were at Great Notion serving up variety of fruit beers and sours, and the blueberry one that I've probably talked to death about on this show. But it really did. I like bringing it up only because I would never on my own have gone there, much less looked at the menu and go, I'm going to get that blueberry, sour. And it turned out for the style, it was good. It was great. I appreciated it in that one moment. Fast forward now, I'd have to be in the mood again. When we go to Rhode Island, Providence in late June, I am looking forward to our horizons being widened again, because we're in that area. I mean, there's no way we're going to avoid it, right? We're not going to go to Providence and go find me a traditional German bar, and that's where we're hanging out the whole time. Now, if we do find one, I will hang out there a lot, because James has turned me into a lover of all things German, specifically the beer, like German lagers. Man, I could just retire on those, and the Kolsch and the Alt, which I don't know. They're ales, I think, traditionally. We haven't had that argument yet on the show. But
I think a Kolsch can actually be brewed to be a lager or an ale. It depends on the yeast you're using, I believe.
Right.
But I thought traditionally that it was a lager style, but
I don't know that's why I never know what they literally classify it as, because it uses ale yeast, but you do lager it in regards to the verb for cold conditioning, right? So I don't even want it, man. Some people think that I'm only playing a shtick on this show of not knowing a lot. I'm very dedicated to that shtick, guys. I'm very dedicated to it. Earlier, you mentioned the equipment. We did talk about the RoboBrew. That craft brews, the catalyst from them.
Yes.
I have not ever had real person tell me their real feedback on it. I'm interested to know. It looks interesting. Their marketing team does great. Like, I get Facebook ads for it. every day that they've probably spent a lot of money on people like me who get it in their feed and clicked on the video. I think that cost them money, but I've never bought one. I'm sorry, Craft to Brew. What are your thoughts on that catalyst system? Because I know people have questions about, oh, well, I'm going to reintroduce oxygen every time I remove that little, mason jar for the trub and all that. Have you had any issues with yours?
So I actually don't use it that often anymore. I use it. It's become my wine, mead, and cider fermenter. I switched over to the stainless steel. I have a Spike fermenter and an SS Brewtech fermenter, both with temperature control. So the thing on the catalyst, I enjoyed it while I used it, but then it never had a sample port. So I ordered a sample port, and you have to drill a hole in the bottom of the conical. And I did. And at first it leaked a little bit because they give you a really crummy washer. And I'm kind of looking at it right now. It's right here next to me. But
you have judgmental eyes. I see those.
Yeah, I'll tell you, after I put that in, I only maybe put 3 different batches in it just because I had issues with it leaking. When I put the butterfly valve, I screwed back on, and I have a cover that covers the plastic. That got caught on the threads, and it was leaking. I lost like a half a gallon of beer one day. I don't have any of those problems with the stainless. I did once see, and I don't know that Craft to Brew's done it yet, but they were talking about putting out a stainless version, which that I might be interested in.
Yeah, I haven't heard that. That would be interesting because I know, like I said, people. I get the feeling though too. The internet, as much as I love it, and it gives me the opportunity to reach people and communicate and all these ideas, but the comment section on any given video is basically a dumpster fire, more times than not. And most of the comments on the Craft to Brew's videos that they do for the Catalyst. I feel like a lot of those are people who have never used the product. And so I'm always leery because the feedback is like, oh, that's going to make sure you're going to oxidate every beer. I'm like, that kind of makes sense. But I don't think they used it. Like, I don't think that's necessarily true.
Communicate with them. Like, I reached out to them about it to see if there was anything that they suggested. And they said it's such a fast action that it's so minimal that it doesn't really introduce as much oxygen as you think. But I didn't. So I actually drew beer from I put a rack in and I pulled out a mason jar worth of beer, screwed it back on so that when it did drop, it only dropped about a half of an inch it was a half inch of airspace.
Oh, that's smart.
So it didn't really have that huge rush of air like it normally does.
You seem resourceful. I like that. Are you a DIYer by trade? Like, is that?
I do what I can to get by. I don't build a lot of things, but like I used to build swing sets for a living, so I can use my hands, but like I just try to logically think it through. Like, what can I do that won't? I'm an IT guy, so like. It's all logic. Like, I look 16 steps ahead before I make that first move.
I need to try that, man. I'm doing like the 1.5 step ahead. The baby steps, like my toddler. Right. My toddler. I think ahead like she walks, trying to stumble. Again, I hate to just keep harping on equipment, but man, you are just listing out like you obviously fell head over heels for brewing because you're 2+ ish years of brewing, and you've got temperature controlled for your fermenting. You not just one, you name dropped 2, both phenomenal brands by the way, too, Spike and SS. If you had to pick on any side of the process, whether from your kettle or now your Robo Brew or your conicals or whatever, what is your favorite piece of equipment that you use and why?
So I bought the SS Brewtech fermenter first, and that I added the temperature control because it was absolutely necessary. But to be honest, the Spike Brewing fermenter that I have, the 5-gallon fermenter, is probably the most fantastic piece of equipment I have because it came with the sampling port where it's got the little screw knob, and you can really moderate that pour for the sample. It's got I added a sight glass to it, the big like 3-inch sight glass. I love the butterfly valves that they have on there. The temperature, the coils going down the center of the fermenter. It's just the cooling lines going in are wrapped with insulation. Like, it's just a high quality build. The only complaint I have about it is the actual temperature controller itself. It's kind of like one of those Inkbird ones.
Right.
Whereas the SS BrewTech is a really nice little box with a little flip switch, and it's built way better than the Spike Brewing one. But overall, the Spike Brewing one's phenomenal. Now, I didn't tell you about the replacement of the Robo Brew that I got, though. So when it burned up, it was still under warranty. So I contacted the place I bought it from, which happened to be out in California, and they sent me the next day. I had a new Robo Brew, and they upgraded me to the one with the internal pump. So now I have the circulating arm, and I've learned a little bit about this system. I actually prop it up now, so it gets air movement underneath it. I'm much more cautious with it. The board's finicky, the controller's finicky, and I don't want to have another situation where I burn up my system. So I take it easy, but I really do like the fact that I can Vorloff during the brew process with that. While it's mashing, I can just keep it circulating, and I love that.
Yeah, the more you brew and enhance your technique or work on your technique, the more little details, and I guess being able to Vorloff arguably is not a little detail. I mean, when you do it, it's like, oh, how much of a difference does that make on my grain bed, right? Like on that whole process, and being able to do it, it's like, oh, that feels really good. I didn't realize I wanted to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I can tell you too, so going into all grain, that was my first major move. The second one was I wanted to get into water chemistry. So I live out in an area that I have a well, and we have the worst water in the county, I was told. It's got the highest hardness levels, the highest iron, and the highest sulfur content. So when we first moved in here, I had an air system installed in my house that actually cleared the sulfur and the iron. So then I also have a water softener. Last July, I had an RO system installed, but not just any RO system. And I didn't get a 5-gallon system. I told him what I was doing with it, and he said, we're going to bump you up to the 10-gallon system. So, and they sold me it's more of a commercial membrane, so it can handle a little bit more volume. So I have a system now that I can do 10-gallon batches. And I also I bought one of the Lamont Brew Lab water testers.
Yeah.
So I have a whole water profile built, and basically any brew that I do, any recipe that I create, I try to match it to a water profile of that region or that style. And I just, I use some sodium. I use gypsum and Epsom salts and stuff like that, chalk.
And interrupting real quick, are you using software at all to manage your brews to keep track of this?
I use Beersmith.
Oh yeah, man, that's another guy I want to get on the show. Brad, do you listen to his podcast?
I have. I listened to him and Palmer do a podcast a couple of times. I love Charlie Bamforth, so I've listened to his episodes too. So
yeah, Brad's
really smart.
He is really smart. He actually knows what he's doing, and he has the voice of radio. Like he has that welcome back to I'm trying.
Sometimes he's over my head though. Like even I feel like, what is he talking? Like when him and Palmer start geeking out, I can't even keep up.
And Kenny, that's where we come in as the Homebrew Happy Hour. Yeah, that should be the best feedback I ever have of the show. Like Palmer and Brad were just over my head, but your podcast was right there.
I feel good when I listen to you guys.
Yeah. Hey, wait, man, when I was talking about getting into all grain with my pop, Todd had originally recommended, why don't you just, you could buy a Robo Brew, because him and James have kind of determined that's like the best bang for your buck in that realm. Or they actually, I think James initially, because James is a total do-it-yourselfer. So he was like, we'll get your mash and boil dirt cheap. We'll build out the pump. We'll do this and this and this. And I was like, James, when you say we, it's going to be you, dude, because I'm not going to do that stuff. I'm not handy.
Right.
I'm on the upper precipice of millennial, but I'm like the stereotypical one that nobody likes. I'm just not good at handy stuff.
Right.
But the reason we didn't was because I had this kind of like romantic vision of brewing like the old school way, because obviously the German and Belgian monks back then had igloo coolers. You know, like brewing, like, but I don't know why I romanticize like, oh, the more work I'm doing, the more satisfying it's going to be. But like talking to you, another listener of the show, we've had him as a guest, and he just sent us his alt beer, Brandon, our buddy Brandon Allen. He is a believer of the Grainfather. The more I talk to you guys about it, the more I'm like, man, I should buy one of those too, and I could just brew here. And you know, I might be able to hide it from my wife. They tuck away fairly easy.
They do.
And I should ask you. You seem like the pro. You are going from home brewer to prosumer so quick. Your wife and family, they're just all thumbs up on board with your hobby turned passion.
Yeah, I mean, my wife really, we travel around and we go see a lot of breweries, and she's big into craft beer too. I really turned her. She didn't used to like it, but we go to beer fests. We go to we go on beercations. She's behind it, and like this the New England that I'm drinking right now is one of her favorites. And I know if she says that beer's phenomenal, then I know I've done something right. So she typically, I mean, the end game is eventually I would love to become a pro brewer, like start my own. I'd love to have my own macro nano brew. I don't want to go huge or anything, but I really enjoy this a lot. You know what I mean? This has become a very passionate habit. Yeah. Hobby.
All of the above. And
right.
that's a great segue, because I was going to ask you haven't, in the bigger picture of our lives, you're still fresh into this. You're still obviously zealous for perfecting your techniques and learning your equipment and all that. When did Brewer of Seville, was that from the beginning kind of a way for you to keep track of this hobby, or did you start it as more of a branding because your future goal is bigger than just, home brewing?
So it kind of started shortly after I started brewing. It was probably about a month or two in, and I'm from a town called Seville, and everybody is familiar with the Barber of Seville, the play.
Yes.
So I work with a guy, and he's like, you should call yourself the Brewer of Seville, and I'm like, hey, that makes sense, right? I mean, so yeah. So I work for an art company, and that's where my logo came from. One of the artists that used to work for us, she drew my caricature for the Brewer of Seville logo, and she actually did a couple of labels for my beer, and it just kind of grew from that. And then I started the Facebook page, and then I started the Instagram page, and I'm wearing my shirt today. I don't know if you can see it, but
yeah, and I've got your logo right on the screen too. It's
okay.
I love that logo. That's why I knew, I was like, oh, for his lower third, I have to get it up on the screen, because it's such a cool. She did a really good job. Yeah,
she did. She really did, and it's actually a little off now that my beard's way longer than the actual caricature. But yeah, it's kind of grown. Like I was just down in we call it Amish country here in middle Ohio, essentially, and we were at a couple of wineries, and I had a couple of people that follow my page comment later on in the day, like, hey, I saw you at such and such winery. I'm like, why didn't you come say hello? They're like, oh, I didn't want to bother you. I'm like, I'm not that famous.
And here I am begging for people to come talk to me. And we had listeners at NHC at HomebrewCon this last year who, thankfully, Andrew and Miranda, I'm talking about you guys, they were so lovely. They came to get their shirts, and they saw Todd and James, and they said, no, we're just here for Joshua. It made my life. Made my life. Oh my God. Everyone thinks that this show's about homebrewing. No, guys, it's about me. Anyway, I just made it about me. So, you now, for the Brewer of Seville, because I've been to the site, and it seems like your social presence for sure is picking up steam. What is your vision with the site? Like, is that logging brew days, your recipes? Like, what is your goal with the site? Because it looks cool. It's very user intuitive, and it right now,
It's limited content right now.
Yeah, but that's what I was going to say, though. It seems like you have plans for it, though.
I do. So I just recently purchased the actual domain name, the Brewer of Seville.com, because it used to be a free WordPress site. So I actually bought the domain name. My goal is, once I'm done with school in May, I'm going to actually focus a lot more on putting content on there. I want to do kind of like brewery reviews. I want to review equipment, homebrew equipment. I want to do a little bit of craft brew review, maybe log some pictures of some brew days. It's just a matter of like working out the kinks and stuff. But that's I want it for that. But right now it's so much easier to post on Facebook and Instagram.
Oh, yeah.
So I use those platforms a lot more. And it's, I think I got between the two pages real close to about 1,000 followers. So I'm getting there.
Oh, yeah. Well, and like you said, too, I get the feeling when talking to you that you're similar to us. Because, like, I couldn't tell you our page follower numbers. I'm actually super impressed whenever I look at our download numbers. I'm like, goodness. Why? Todd is, too. Todd thinks he was convinced for the longest time that nobody was listening. I show him our download numbers of, like, a few months ago, and he was like, come on, dude, that's Photoshop. I was like, no, we're on the internet. You see how that's a browser? I typed it in. Like, you can't Photoshop that. I get the feeling from you, though, like, you're going to be doing this anyway, right? Even if you had like an audience of a few dozen, you're still going to be doing this because you obviously enjoy the brewing of it, whether people are watching you or not. As you take that sip, I was going to ask you, what was your last brew day, and what do you have fermenting? Like, what's coming down the pipe at your house?
So in my house, I have 4 taps, and I actually bought the upgraded taps from you guys over at Keg Connection. I bought the inline regulator. Matter of fact, you helped me get some of that straightened around. Kind of how we met, I guess.
No, and, remember, Kenny, I don't know anything about anything. That's the shtick, remember.
So what I have on tap right now is I have a chocolate coconut banana stout. I have that Scottish export that I'm putting in at the HomebrewCon. I have a New England IPA milkshake, and then I have a regular West Coast IPA that's on tap. Now I also have in my fermenter, I have that dragon fruit blonde.
Is that
now that one? I'm real excited about that one because I actually modified the recipe a little bit, and I added. It used to just be. It was a smash beer that I started with. I just did Pilsner malts and I did cashmere hops. Now I'm using Pilsner malt, and then I also added cashmere hops, but I also added Nelson hops as well. And then this is the first batch I've ever done where I'm using harvested yeast. So I started harvesting my own yeast just to save some dough. And I've got about 10 or 12 jars of my own yeast in the fridge right now that I collected off of Cal-El yeast. So
besides all the milkshake fruity stuff, you and James are cut from the same cloth, man. Especially like the DIY, like you said you're not a DIYer. Come on, man. I'm like, you are jumping deep into this. Like I call me in 5 years when I finally try to do a juicy New England IPA or something that with some oomph. I was listening to your list and I'm thinking, was that West Coast IPA the lowest ABV he has on tap?
You want to get this? That's actually one of the highest ones I have on tap. It's 7.6.
Is it really?
The New England 6.9, the Scottish is 5.2, and the Stout's 5.3.
Oh, okay. I was just saying stouts aren't always. I mean, that sounds about right. I don't know.
I'm actually going to do a dry Irish stout when we get back from Florida. That's my next one on deck.
What of those? I know you're talking about getting your wife into craft brewing. What is her favorite?
She does love New England's, and she started to actually get into IPAs. She didn't used to like them, but she also digs sours and fruit beers too. Oh yeah. The lovely sours and fruit beers. One day I'll get into them. Before we wrap this up, I do want to give you the opportunity, though. First, thank you so much for your time, for doing the interview, for coming on the show, for sticking around through all those technical difficulties, and for dealing with me. I appreciate you. I
I wanted to give you a chance to plug. We did say the Brewer of Seville is where they can find you, and then thebrewerseville.com. Is there anything else that you can think of that we forgot to mention?
Okay, it's at Brewer of Seville is the Instagram, and then Facebook is the Brewer of Seville, and the Twitter account I think is the Brewer of Seville also.
Perfect. Kenny, again, through all of that, I think I got you for 35 minutes, but I kept you for 90. I do appreciate your time, my friend. We will next time. Well, first off, we did talk about meeting up at HomebrewCon. Please let's do that. And James and me and Todd are in the process of planning out some sort of informal meetup. Again, there might be, 9 of us, but we really, last time in Portland, you would not believe how much fun we had, especially with people who knew the places to go. I felt spoiled. They're like, oh, for you, Josh and James and Todd, y'all like this, we'll go here first. And I was like, this is the best thing ever.
Yeah.
Having people.
Well, I'm getting into town on Wednesday that week, and I'm staying at a hotel that's about 8 minutes from the convention center. So
I don't, unfortunately, I'm the one in charge of all the booking, and I couldn't tell you where we're staying. Todd just booked the flights, actually, so that's the first step. Well, we're gonna be there. I could book the stuff whenever. But anyways, Kenny, again, my friend, thank you so much for doing the show, and and we'll see you at HomebrewCon.
All right, Josh, thanks a lot for having me.
Absolutely, and that will do it for this episode of the Homebrew Happy Hour. If you have a question you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, visit homebrewhappyhour.com and click on the submit a question link at the top of the page. Or now you can call or text them in by using 325-305-6107. Thank you to our show sponsor, homebrewsupply.com, for supporting our podcast and the home brewing community. Go to homebrewsupply.com, use the promo code HHH, and you'll receive 5% off your order. On behalf of Todd Burns, James Carlson, and the Pearl Media Network, I'm Joshua Steubing. Thank you for listening.